I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but recent events have brought back memories I've tried to bury for years. I'm Paul, 28M, and this is the story of how I reconnected with my long-lost brother and uncovered a family secret that changed everything. Growing up, it was just me, my younger brother Mikey, 25M, and our dad, Martin, 52M. Mom left when I was 5, and Mikey was just 2. At least, that's what we were told. Dad always said she couldn't handle the responsibilities of motherhood and chose to leave. We never questioned it because, well, what else could we do? Our childhood home was a small, 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I remember the creaky floorboards in the hallway, the way the kitchen faucet always dripped no matter how many times Dad tried to fix it, and the old oak tree in the backyard where Mikey and I spent countless summer days building makeshift forts and pretending to be explorers. Dad worked hard to provide for us, often taking double shifts at the local factory to make ends meet. He'd come home late, smelling of sweat and metal, his hands rough and calloused. Despite his exhaustion, he always made time to ask about our day and help with homework when he could. I took on the role of caretaker for Mikey when Dad was working late. I made sure he ate, did his homework, and got to bed on time. It wasn't ideal, but we had each other, and that was enough. I remember nights when Mikey would crawl into my bed, scared of the dark or the thunderstorms that rattled our windows. I'd tell him stories, made up adventures about brave knights and clever wizards, until he fell asleep. We didn't have much, but we made do. Christmases were lean, but Dad always managed to fix together enough for at least one present each. I'll never forget the year he got me my first bicycle. It was secondhand and a bit rusty, but to me, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. I spent that entire summer teaching Mikey how to ride without training wheels, running alongside him as he wobbled and cheered when he finally managed to pedal on his own. School was a challenge for both of us. I was a quiet kid, more interested in books than sports or socializing. Mikey, on the other hand, was all energy and charm, making friends easily but struggling with academics. I helped him with his studies as best I could, feeling a sense of pride when his grades improved. As we grew older, I started to notice things. The way Dad's eyes would sometimes linger on old photos he kept hidden in his dresser drawer. The sadness that seemed to hang over our house like a heavy cloud, especially around holidays and birthdays. And the way Dad would sometimes look at us with a mixture of love and something else. Guilt? Regret? I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Everything changed when I turned 16. It was a Friday, and I remember feeling excited about the weekend. Mikey and I had plans to go to the local arcade, a rare treat we'd been saving up for weeks to afford. I came home from school, dumping my backpack by the door as usual, calling out to let Dad and Mikey know I was home. The house was eerily quiet. Then I heard it, the sound of breaking glass followed by a muffled sob. I rushed to the living room and froze at the sight before me. The room was in chaos. Books and papers were strewn across the floor, a shattered picture frame lay near the wall, and in the center of it all was Dad, slumped in his armchair, an empty bottle of whiskey dangling from his hand. Mikey was cowering in a corner, tears streaming down his face. When Dad saw me, he lurched to his feet, his eyes wild with a mixture of anger and something that looked like fear. He lunged forward, nearly losing his balance. I stepped in front of Mikey, shielding him from whatever was coming. That's when Dad dropped the bomb that shattered our world. He wasn't our real father. Our mom hadn't abandoned us, she had died in a car accident when I was 4. Martin was her brother, our uncle, who had taken us in after her death. He had been struggling with the burden of raising us, turning to alcohol to cope. The room spun around me as I tried to process this information. Memories flashed through my mind, hazy recollections of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle laugh, the faint scent of lavender that I'd always associated with comfort but could never place. Had that been our mother? I looked at Mikey, saw the fear and confusion in his eyes, and knew I had to get us out of there. I grabbed his hand, and we ran. We didn't stop until we reached our neighbor's house, Mrs. Thompson, 65F. She had always been kind to us, offering cookies and a sympathetic ear when things got tough at home. Mrs. Thompson took us in that night, her face creased with worry as she made up the spare room for us. I remember sitting at her kitchen table, a mug of hot chocolate growing cold in front of me, as she called social services. Mikey fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from crying, while I sat there, numb and silent, trying to make sense of how our lives had changed in just a few short hours. Within a week, Mikey and I were placed in separate foster homes. I fought hard to keep us together, pleading with the social workers, but the system had other plans. The last time I saw Mikey, he was being driven away in a social worker's car, his small face pressed against the window, tears streaming down his cheeks. I stood there on the sidewalk, my own cheeks wet with tears, feeling like I'd failed in my most important job, protecting my little brother. The years that followed were a blur of different homes, schools, and faces. I withdrew into myself, focusing on my studies as a way to escape the turmoil of my life. Books became my refuge, offering worlds far removed from the harsh realities of my own. I excelled academically, earning praise from teachers and foster parents alike, but inside, I felt hollow. Every birthday, every holiday, I thought about Mikey. Where was he? Was he safe? Happy? Did he remember me? I imagined him growing up, wondered if he still had that mischievous glint in his eye, if he still bit his lip when he was concentrating hard on something. As soon as I turned 18 and aged out of the system, I started searching for Mikey in earnest. I scoured social media, contacted adoption agencies, even hired a private investigator with money I'd saved from part-time jobs. But with limited resources and information, my efforts were fruitless. Determined to make something of myself, I threw myself into my studies. I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote countless essays, and spent sleepless nights preparing for exams. My hard work paid off when I received a full scholarship to a prestigious university. College was a time of growth and self-discovery. I made friends, joined clubs, even dated a bit. But always, in the back of my mind, was the thought of Mikey and the family we'd lost. I majored in marketing, drawn to the creativity and strategy it required. After graduation, I landed a good job at an up-and-coming advertising firm. On the surface, my life looked perfect. I had a successful career, a nice apartment, and a wide circle of friends. But the hole in my heart remained. Every time I saw brothers together, at the park, in restaurants, on the street, I felt a pang of loss so acute it took my breath away. Then, last month, everything changed. I was scrolling through Facebook mindlessly one evening when I received a friend request that made my heart stop. The name on the profile was Michael Thompson. The profile picture showed a young man with familiar eyes, my eyes. With shaking hands, I accepted the request. Within minutes, I received a message. Paul? Is it really you? It's me, Mikey. I've been looking for you for so long. We arranged to meet at a local coffee shop. The days leading up to our meeting were a mixture of excitement and anxiety. What if he didn't like the person I'd become? What if we had nothing in common anymore? What if this was all some cruel mistake? When I saw him walk into the coffee shop, all my fears melted away. He had grown so much, but I could still see the little boy I used to protect. We hugged for what felt like hours, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. The other patrons in the coffee shop must have thought we were crazy, but we didn't care. Over steaming cups of coffee that grew cold as we talked, Mikey told me his story. Mrs. Thompson, our kind neighbor from all those years ago, had pulled some strings and adopted him shortly after we were separated. She had tried to adopt me too, but by then, I had already been placed with another family. She gave Mikey her last name to protect him from Martin, which is why I could never find him. Mikey's life with Mrs. Thompson sounded like something out of a heartwarming movie. She had been patient and kind, helping him work through the trauma of our separation and the revelations about our past. She encouraged his interests, celebrated his achievements, and provided the stable, loving home we had always craved. We spent hours catching up. Mikey is now a teacher, married to his high school sweetheart, Lisa, 24F. They're expecting their first child in a few months. He showed me pictures of his life, his friends, his home. I was overjoyed to see how happy and successful he had become. But there was more to the story. Mikey had been doing some digging of his own, trying to uncover the truth about our past. He had discovered something that shook us both to the core. Our mother hadn't died in a car accident. She had been murdered. And Martin, our uncle who raised us, was the prime suspect. The case had gone cold years ago, but Mikey had found old newspaper articles and police reports. The evidence was circumstantial, but it painted a damning picture. Martin had been the last person to see our mom alive. He had inherited her house and custody of us after her death. And there were inconsistencies in his alibi that were never fully explained. As Mikey laid out everything he'd discovered, I felt like I was in a movie, one of those twisty crime dramas where nothing is as it seems. How could this be our life? How could we have lived with a potential murderer? And if Martin had killed our mother, why had he raised us as his own? Now, we're faced with a decision. Do we reopen old wounds and push for the case to be reinvestigated? Or do we leave the past in the past and focus on rebuilding our relationship as brothers? I'm torn. Part of me wants justice for our mother, wants to know the truth about what happened that night. But another part of me is terrified of what we might uncover. What if Martin really did kill her? Can we handle that truth? For now, Mikey and I are taking things one day at a time. We're getting to know each other again, filling in the gaps of the years we missed. It's strange and wonderful and heartbreaking all at once. We swap stories of our childhoods, the good and the bad, and marvel at how different our paths have been. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing: I'm never letting my little brother go again. Whatever comes next, whatever truths we uncover, we'll face it together. Because that's what brothers do. Update 1, it's been 2 months since I reconnected with Mikey, and so much has happened that I hardly know where to begin. The joy of our reunion has been tempered by the weight of the past we're uncovering, but having my brother back in my life has given me a strength I never knew I possessed. After much discussion, Mikey and I decided to pursue the truth about our mother's death. We couldn't let it go, knowing there was a possibility that her killer was still out there, possibly the very man who raised us. The decision wasn't easy. We spent countless nights talking it over, weighing the potential consequences against our need for closure. We started by reaching out to the detective who had originally worked on the case, Detective Simmons, 58M. Finding him wasn't easy, He'd retired years ago and moved to a small town on the coast. But Mikey, ever resourceful, managed to track down his contact information through an old colleague at the police department. When we called him, Detective Simmons was initially hesitant to discuss the case. But something in our voices must have moved him, because he agreed to meet with us. We drove 3 hours to his hometown, a quaint little place with more fishing boats than cars. We met Simmons at a small diner by the harbor. I'll never forget the look on his face when we walked in. He looked like he had seen ghosts, his weathered face paling as he recognized us from old case photos. "I always wondered what happened to you boys," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Your mother's case. It haunted me for years." Over plates of greasy diner food that none of us really ate, Detective Simmons spent hours going over the case with us. He shared details that hadn't been in the newspaper articles or police reports we had found. Our mother, Angela, 29F, had been found in her car at the bottom of a ravine off a lonely stretch of highway. The initial ruling was an accident, but Simmons had never bought it. There were no skid marks on the road, he explained, his coffee growing cold as he gestured with his hands. No sign that she had tried to brake. And the guardrail. It looked like it had been hit with considerable force. More force than you'd expect from a car simply veering off the road. And then there was the matter of the life insurance policy. Just 2 weeks before her death, Martin had convinced Angela to take out a substantial life insurance policy. He was the sole beneficiary. It wasn't enough to convict him, but it was enough to make Simmons suspicious. "I tried to push for a deeper investigation," Simmons said, his eyes clouded with old regret. "But without hard evidence, my superiors weren't willing to pursue it. And then, well, life happened. Other cases came up. But I never forgot about your mother." As we delved deeper into the case, Mikey and I found ourselves on an emotional roller coaster. There were days when we were determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. We'd stay up late into the night, poring over old documents, trying to piece together a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Other days, the weight of it all felt too heavy to bear. I remember one night when Mikey called me, his voice choked with tears. "What if we're wrong, Paul?" he asked. "What if Martin is innocent and we're dragging his name through the mud for nothing?" I had no answers, only shared uncertainty and a promise that whatever we discovered, we'd face it together. One particularly difficult day, Mikey and I decided to visit our childhood home. It had been sold years ago, but we thought seeing it might jog some memories. As we stood on the sidewalk, staring at the house where we had spent our early years, a flood of memories washed over me. I could almost hear the echo of our childish laughter, see the ghost of our younger selves playing in the yard. As we stood there, lost in our thoughts, an elderly woman approached us. She walked slowly, leaning on a cane, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Can I help you boys?" she asked, her voice kind but cautious. We explained who we were, and her face lit up with recognition. "Oh my," she said, her free hand flying to her mouth. "You're Angela's boys. I remember when you were just little things." Her name was Margaret, 75F, and she had been our next door neighbor when we lived there. She invited us in for tea, and as we sat in her cozy living room, surrounded by photos of her own children and grandchildren, she shared memories of our mother that brought tears to our eyes. "Your mother was a wonderful woman," Margaret said, pouring tea into delicate china cups. "So full of life and love for you boys. She used to bring you over here sometimes, you know. You'd play in the backyard while we chatted. She was always talking about her plans for your future, how she wanted to give you the best life possible." Margaret told us about how our mother would sing while she gardened, how she always had a kind word for everyone in the neighborhood. She described a woman who loved fiercely and lived fully, a far cry from the shadowy figure we'd carried in our memories. Then Margaret hesitated, looking uncertain. She set down her teacup with a shaky hand. I never told anyone this before," she said slowly. "But the night before your mother died, I heard her arguing with Martin. It was late, and I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it was heated. I saw her storm out of the house, get in her car and drive away. Martin followed in his car a few minutes later. The next day. Well, you know what happened." Mikey and I exchanged glances. This was new information, something that had never made it into the official reports. Could it be the missing piece we needed? We left Margaret's house with heavy hearts and racing minds. On the drive home, we dissected every word of her story, trying to fit this new piece into the puzzle of our past. Armed with this new lead, we went back to Detective Simmons. He listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration as we relayed Margaret's account. "This could be significant," he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I always felt there was more to the story." Simmons agreed to help us push for the case to be reopened. He warned us it would be an uphill battle given how much time had passed, but he had connections in the department and promised to do what he could. As we navigate this complex and emotional journey, Mikey and I have grown closer than ever. We talk every day, sharing our fears, our hopes, our memories. It's strange how quickly we've fallen back into the rhythms of brotherhood, as if the years apart were just a brief interruption. Lisa, Mikey's wife, has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She's often there during our late-night strategy sessions, offering a fresh perspective or just a comforting presence. I can see why Mikey fell in love with her. She has a quiet strength that seems to ground him. There are moments when the weight of it all feels overwhelming. Like when we found an old photo album in Margaret's attic, filled with pictures of our mother. Seeing her face, so like Mikey's, with my eyes, brought home the reality of what we lost. Or when we had to explain to Lisa's parents why we might not be able to make it to their anniversary party. How do you tell someone you might be busy trying to solve your mother's decades-old murder? But then I look at Mikey, see the determination in his eyes, and I know we can face anything as long as we're together. We're not just doing this for ourselves, or even for our mother. We're doing it for the truth, whatever that might be. The road ahead is uncertain, but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. With my brother by my side, we're ready to face whatever comes next. Update 2, another month has passed, and our lives have taken yet another unexpected turn. The detective working on reopening our mother's case called us with some startling news. They found new evidence. It turns out that an old security camera from a gas station near the ravine where our mother's car was found had been storing footage from that night. The camera had been thought to be broken at the time, but a tech-savvy officer managed to recover some corrupted files. The footage isn't clear, it's grainy and dark, but it shows a car matching our mother's model being followed closely by another vehicle on the night she died. The second car's license plate isn't visible, but the make and model matched the car Martin owned at the time. This new evidence was enough to get the case officially reopened. Mikey and I were called in for questioning, asked to recount everything we could remember from our childhood. It was a grueling process, dredging up memories we had long tried to forget. We spent hours in a small, stuffy interview room, answering question after question. What was our relationship with Martin like? Did we ever notice any tension between him and our mother? Did we remember anything unusual from around the time of her death? One particular memory stood out. I remembered a night, not long before we were taken away, when I overheard Martin on the phone. He was angry, shouting about money and secrets. At the time, I didn't understand what it meant, but now, it seems significant. I told the detectives about this, watching as they exchanged glances and scribbled notes. They asked me to try and remember more details. What exactly did Martin say? What time of night was it? Did I ever hear him make similar calls? I felt frustrated by how much I couldn't recall, how much had been lost to time and trauma. As the investigation progressed, we learned more about our mother's life, and Martin's. It turns out that Martin had been in significant debt at the time of our mother's death. The life insurance payout had cleared all his debts almost overnight. The police also uncovered records of large cash withdrawals from our mother's bank account in the weeks leading up to her death. When questioned about this, Martin claimed that Angela had been planning to leave town with us, and the money was for our new life. But no one could corroborate this story. Throughout all of this, Mikey and I have been struggling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, we want justice for our mother. The thought that her killer might have been walking free all these years, that we might have lived under the same roof as him, makes my blood boil. On the other hand, the thought that the man who raised us, despite his flaws, might be a murderer is almost too much to bear. I remember Martin teaching me how to ride a bike, helping Mikey with his math homework, working long hours to keep a roof over our heads. How do I reconcile those memories with the possibility that he might have killed our mother? Lisa, bless her, has been our rock through all of this. She's listened to our fears, held us when we cried, and reminded us to eat and sleep when we got too caught up in the investigation. Her pregnancy is progressing well, and sometimes, in the midst of all this darkness, feeling the baby kick brings a moment of pure joy. Then, last week, everything came to a head. The police called us in again, this time with news that made my blood run cold. They had found Martin. Update 3, the past week has been a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. When the police told us they had found Martin, Mikey and I braced ourselves for a confrontation. But what happened next, none of us could have predicted. Martin wasn't found alive. His body was discovered in a small apartment in a neighboring state, where he had apparently been living under an assumed name for years. The cause of death was determined to be natural causes, a heart attack. The apartment was a treasure trove of information. Among Martin's belongings, the police found a journal. In it, Martin had written a detailed confession of what really happened the night our mother died. According to the journal, Martin had indeed been deeply in debt. He had approached our mother for help, but she had refused, threatening to cut him off completely. In a fit of desperation and anger, Martin had followed her that night, intending to confront her again. Their argument on the road had become heated. Martin admitted to running Angela's car off the road, but claimed he hadn't meant to kill her. He wrote about his shock and horror when he realized what he had done, about how he had panicked and fled the scene. The journal went on to detail the guilt and remorse that had eaten at him over the years. He wrote about how he had tried to make it up to us by raising us as his own, but that the weight of his secret had driven him to drink and ultimately to abandon us. Reading those words, hearing the full truth after all these years, was overwhelming. Mikey and I spent hours talking, crying, trying to process everything. We felt anger, grief, confusion, and a strange sort of relief at finally knowing the truth. The case is now officially closed. Martin's confession, along with the other evidence, provides a clear picture of what happened that night. There will be no trial, no sentencing, no face-to-face confrontation. In a way, I'm grateful for that. I'm not sure I could have faced Martin after learning the truth. As for Mikey and me, we're focusing on healing and moving forward. We've decided to honor our mother's memory by starting a foundation in her name, aimed at helping children who have lost parents to violence. Lisa gave birth to a beautiful baby girl last week. They named her Angela, after our mother. Holding my niece for the first time, I felt a surge of love and protectiveness. I promised her silently that she would grow up knowing the truth about her grandmother, not just how she died, but how she lived and loved. This journey has been painful and difficult, but it's also brought Mikey and me closer than ever. We've reclaimed our past, confronted our demons, and now we're ready to face the future, together, as a family.